Okay, in this video, I want to show you how I set up a poult or chick brooder. And this is from trial and error, so I'm just going to show you what works for me. And so first of all, I like these Commander XXL 40-gallon storage tubs as a brooder tank. They work great, and they're only about 20 bucks. You can get them just about anywhere, Lowe's or Home Depot, or I think even Walmart. So that's how I start them. And I go about 10 poults at first, and you could go up to 15 for the first week, but after about a week you can only really do 10, and then at 3 weeks I separate them out, and then there would be 5 per brooder. So anyway, this is the initial setup, except that I would normally have paper towels covering the entire surface for the first few days. And the reason for that is that their droppings are very watery, and also they tend to eat the pine shavings, and that's not good. So I leave the paper towels totally covering it for about the first 3 days, and then after the first week I still leave it covered like this. But after a week, it's your choice. You can leave them out or leave them in, but it's easier to clean up with the paper towels in. So for the first few days, I just take a lid like this, a black jar lid container of some type, and you just sprinkle some food in there. Make sure it's a small enough mash size or that they can eat it. And I put it kind of close to the brooder plate, and the water is kind of up on a little plate, and that way it's really accessible for them. And you might have to kind of tap on this to get them pecking at it, but the contrast of the dark on light, the food on this, will get them pecking. You can put some beads in the water if they don't drink, but they usually do. This brooder plate, I highly recommend these. This is a Rent-A-Coop 12 by 12. It'll do 10 poults, and I really like these. And as you can see, the front is quite a bit higher than the back, so that gives them some variability. If they're really cold, they can go sleep under the back, and if they want to stand up here under the front, they can. I adjust this so it's about just about touching their head when they're standing up, or in the back touching their head if they were sitting down on the ground with their head sticking up. And that way it's about a ½ inch above their back in those positions, but touching their head. So anyway, moving on here. Oh, I'll show you the box anyway. This is what the box looks like for the brooder plate. These are about $55 at like mypetchicken.com. Pretty cheap, and they work great. Much safer than a heat lamp. So anyway, moving on, I have an air temp monitor, and I like to keep the air temperature at least to 80 degrees. You don't need it like 100 like with a heat lamp, but at least to 80 is good for them for the first week. Then you can drop it down like 75, 71, 5 degrees a week. To accomplish that, I recommend these ceramic base heat lamp fixtures. They're about 10 bucks. And up here I just have a reptile heat emitter, and that's a 150 watt emitter. You don't need one that big. You can see that's about 3 feet above the container. You can just get a little 60 watt container and clip it right on the edge of this. But the reason that I have it up there is because after the first week you will need a lid on the container. This is a ½ inch hardware cloth. You can buy 2 or 3 foot wide rolls by 10 feet for very cheaply at a hardware store or Lowe's or Home Depot. And you'll need this because after about a week they start to jump out. And the reason that I bought the 150 and put it up here is because you can't really clip a fixture on here with the lid, so you'll need somewhere else to clip it, and this is just convenient for me. And to make the right heat, I needed the bigger one, but you could, like I said, do 60 and find a way to get it close, or just set it on top of the mesh. That works too. You would just put it right over on this side. So anyway, so this is gonna be, like I said, for the first 3 days or so. You're gonna set it up like this, and then after that, once they're eating well, you're going to move on to a dish like this, and you can either use a small plate or a saucer like this. And as they get more adventurous and they're coming out more, you're going to just move these back to the edge so they have room to run around. And then after, after a few days, you're going to go ahead and put the top on your feeder so they don't spill food everywhere. Now, the paper towels are nice because it keeps a lot of the sawdust or the pine shavings out of the food and water, but they will still get poop in the water. So as they start to do that, you just add bases, the same watering base that you use here. You just add those, one at first and then later two, and you elevate it that way, and it keeps them from pooping. As they start to jump, they'll want to jump up on here, but by the time you put two bases under it, with the lid on, they won't be able to get up there. So that takes care of that. And the first, something I forgot to mention, crickets are a good first meal if your babies aren't eating well. Just go to the pet store and buy some baby feeder crickets, and they'll eat those, but usually it's not needed. So anyway, let's see here. I think that covers about everything for this, except that if you are doing all 10 poults, you probably will need a trough feeder instead of this round one. This is good for 5 or 6, but if you're doing 10, you would just put one of those long trough feeders right there, the plastic ones. It fits perfect either way, just depending on how many you have. So I think that's about it. Now I'm going to show you the final stage that I would use between 3 and 6 weeks. So at that point, I would split them up into 5 poults per brooder, and I'll show you that now.